Thomas misses out. Next to summer, Christmas time is a close contender for busiest season on the Fat Controller's Railway, because that's when all of the engines work hard to keep to their timetables the most. From clearing the lines to delivering extra goods and parcels, making sure everyone gets their presents on Christmas Day. It truly was the season to be busy. But it's always worth it come Christmas Eve, because that's when Sir Topham Hatt holds the biggest party at Narrated Station. From all over Sodor, everyone comes to socialise, sing carols, and do many other activities. It was always a festive and merry time, and one that all the engines look forward to. Especially Thomas, who worked extra hard to not only make sure everything was in order on his branch line, but to ensure that he and his friends working there could go to the party too. On the afternoon the day before Christmas Eve, Thomas steamed into Narrated Station with Annie and Clarabel. When he saw the workmen hanging up the last decorations for the following night's party, he became very excited.
I can already tell that this year's party is going to be the best one yet,
he peeped cheerfully to his coaches.
Best one yet indeed,
Annie and Clarabel tittered in agreement. Ah, Thomas, just the engine I'm looking for, said Sir Topham Hatt, coming from his office. I was notified of a last-minute mail train for the mainland, so I need you to take it, as Percy is already busy with his regular runs.
Yes, sir, but who will look after my passengers?
Shelby will be able to handle it until you get back. Now hurry along. Not only does the train need to get through, but a snowstorm will be hitting us tonight, and I don't want you to get stranded. We'll do our best, sir, said Thomas's fireman. As soon as he was uncoupled from Annie and Clarabel, Thomas gave a confident peep peep and set off to collect his snowplow before heading to the mail depot.
Take care, Thomas,
called Annie.
We will,
chuffed Thomas as he steamed through the junction and out of sight. By the time Thomas collected his mail vans, dark clouds were looming overhead. Large snowflakes were starting to fall. Seeing this made Thomas pick up speed. Easy there, soothed his driver as he checked him. No need to be hasty, we're making good time.
And so is the snowstorm,
retorted Thomas.
I'd like to get this over with as quickly as possible.
So do we, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't disregard safety. As much as Thomas didn't like to hear it, he knew his driver was right. It was evening when Thomas arrived on the other railway, and the snowstorm was now upon them. We engines aren't meant to be out in this mess, said the other railway engine, waiting to collect Thomas's mail. It's bad for our condition.
You sound just like a diesel friend of mine,
Thomas chuckled.
A diesel? I am not.
Well, I am, and he's right, grumbled the shunter. And I got to work here in this mess. Oh, stuff it up your exhaust, Roy.
All right, you two, calm down, chuckled Thomas. It is Christmas after all. I've got to be going back to Sodor.
Soon, the mail train was secured, but just as Thomas was about to depart, "You there, not just yet," came a voice. It was the station master. "What's the matter?" asked the driver. "We've just received word that the storm's turning into a whiteout. Your Fat Controller has announced that all trains are cancelled for the rest of the day, and that everyone needs to seek shelter immediately." With that knowledge, the driver and fireman parked Thomas in the nearby goods shed before following the station master to their resting quarters for the night. Despite being sheltered within the shed's canopy, Thomas could still feel some of the cold wind blow through, occasionally sending little flurries of snow into his face which made him shiver. Even though he felt miserable, Thomas was thankful all the same.
Better in here than out there,
he shivered to himself before closing his eyes. That night, the storm came in full force, bringing with it not a pillow or a sheet, but a blanket of snow. All over Sodor, and the mainland, from bustling main lines to countryside branch lines. It was nothing but the white stuff. Though poor Thomas felt exhausted because of the snowstorm's noise, he barely got any sleep. Thankfully, his crew were understanding and allowed him to get some rest as they built his fire and got him ready. Once he was in steam and fully awake, Thomas took in his surroundings as he pulled away from the shed for the journey home. "Looks like it's going to be a rough day for everyone," observed the driver, as he saw Rosie working hard to clear the lines around Vicarstown. But little did any of them realize just how rough it was going to be until they came upon Henry's tunnel, or rather, what they made out to be Henry's tunnel, because it was completely buried in snow. "Cinders and ashes!" exclaimed Thomas, as the driver put the brakes hard on, stopping with the front of his plough firm in the drift. "How are we going to get through that?" "I'm afraid we won't be able to. The snow's far too deep," remarked the driver. "I've got my snowplow, don't I? I'm sure I can get us through." "You'll only succeed in burying yourself," replied the fireman. "The only thing we can do right now is go back, try to get the word out, and find some help." As soon as they returned to Vicarstown, they told the yard foreman their discovery, who quickly set to work making calls. It was a mercy that the snowstorm didn't take all the telephone lines down, for the responses were immediate. As soon as he received the message, Sir Topham Hatt sent Donald and Douglas armed with snowplows and the works train. Harold the helicopter was sent to assist as well, bringing extra supplies, hot drinks and workmen to Thomas, who was already hard at work on his side of the tunnel. With Rosie's help, they had managed to find some workers and were doing their best to clear what they could. As soon as Harold landed, the men thanked him and took a short break before returning to their work. "How's the other side looking, Harold?" asked Thomas. "Just as bad, if not worse, old chap," whirred Harold. "From what I heard, they're speculating this area won't be clear until well after Christmas." "After Christmas?" exclaimed Percy when he heard the news. "But that means Thomas won't be able to join tonight's party." "I'm afraid so, Percy," said his driver. "There's nothing we can do except carry on with the work here. And from what I can see," the fireman added grimly, "there's a lot that needs to be done today, it being Christmas Eve and all." Since Toby was at the other end of the line, this meant that Percy had to take the first passenger train home from Farquhar with Annie, Clarabelle and Coach. And as he made his way down the line, he could hear the coaches clatter sadly. "It's not fair, it's not fair," they wailed, for they had heard about Thomas's situation too. "I agree, it really is a shame," sighed Percy. "I just wish we could do something about it." "It will be all right, dearies," soothed Coach, but no one was sure if it would be. He was still thinking about it as he reached Knapford Station and was taken aback by the terrible state it was in. There was an enormous backlog of trains that were either waiting or slowly being guided through the junction, and workmen were gathering loose items and damaged decorations. Sir Topham Hatt was overlooking the operations. "Excuse me, sir," Percy called out, "but whatever has happened here?" "The storm damaged the signal gantries, as well as most of the decorations for the party tonight," sighed Sir Topham Hatt. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to cancel it, seeing as Knapford Station is in no condition to hold any kind of event, aside from work." Percy began to feel disheartened, until an idea suddenly flew into his funnel. "What if I could offer an alternate solution?" Sir Topham Hatt looked at his engine with intrigue. "As soon as this backlog clears up, I will definitely speak with you." "Come along, we must get through! Come along, we must get through!" Thomas chuffed as he charged into the deep drifts. He knew he wasn't going to make it to the party, but he was determined to make it there for Christmas. But it wasn't to be. When Christmas Day came to an end, they weren't even halfway done. That night, Thomas's crew and the workmen had their own little party at Vicarstown Yard. And even though he was present with Rosie, Thomas couldn't help but feel very depressed. It was the first time he had missed spending Christmas with all of his friends. Rosie tried her best to comfort him.
Think of it this way, Thomas, she said. Thanks to us, we're closer to having the line cleared in time for the railway to resume operations again. That's something to be proud of, isn't it? Sure, but you don't like being stuck in this yard not knowing when you'll get out? If you'll make it in time to be with your friends, trust me, I know how it feels.
Rosie just sighed.
It's not just you. I like my job here in the yard. I really do. It gives me something to do. I know what I'm going to do on any given day, and I'm going to do it well. I just feel like I could do more, you know. Get out of this yard and see the world, chuckled Thomas. Don't worry, you'll get your time to be yourself. Maybe not tonight or even tomorrow, but that time will come. Now, let's get some rest. Still plenty of snow on that tunnel that only we can clear. Merry Christmas, Rosie. Merry Christmas, Thomas.
And with that, the two engines drifted happily off to sleep. The next morning, however, everyone was greeted to a wonderful surprise. Donald and Douglas have finally gotten through their side of the tunnel, exclaimed Thomas's driver. If we get to work on our side now, we'll be home tonight. But Thomas was still sad. Christmas was long over. And when afternoon came, the tedious task had been completed, and a hearty cheer with rounds of congratulations and thank yous was shared. After that, everyone went their separate ways. Donald and Douglas took the works train back to Knapford, with Rosie curiously joining them, while Thomas took the workmen and supplies back to Vickerstown. And once it was done, he set off down the line for home, weary but triumphant. But as he went along the main line, Thomas began to notice that something was off.
Where's Rebecca? Or Gordon? One of them should have passed us with the Evening Express by now.
I don't know, replied the driver as he scratched his head. I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. But as they continued on, there was still no sign of them or any other activity. Every station was bare, and the lines were completely devoid of any kind of railway traffic. This began to worry them. By the time they reached Knapford Station, a wave of relief swept over them as they saw the familiar form of Sir Topham Hatt waiting for them outside his office. Hello, Thomas. I'm pleased that you're safe, and I'm very proud of the work you've done. You're a really useful engine.
Thank you, sir, replied Thomas.
He was about to ask why there was nothing going on when the stationmaster suddenly came up. Excuse me, sir, but you're needed at Tidmouth Sheds. I see, replied Sir Topham Hatt, and he turned to Thomas. I know it's been difficult for you these past few days, but can you please take me to Tidmouth Sheds?
Yes, sir,
Thomas obliged, but he was still very puzzled. When he arrived, the yard was dark and quiet. There was no one in sight. Thomas began to feel a sense of unease.
Excuse me, but does anyone know what's going on right now? Today's been very strange.
You'll see, Thomas, said his driver with a smile, who then clambered down with the fireman and Sir Topham Hatt. The three of them walked over to Thomas's front, faced him, and then shouted with a large smile, "Now!" Suddenly, the sheds and yards were ablaze with lights, revealing festive decorations of every shape, size, and color. But the most surprising thing of all was the crowd. To Thomas, it seemed that the entire island had convened on Tidmouth Sheds, engines and people alike. As they all cheered, Thomas just stared with a dumbfounded expression, unable to say a word.
What's all this?
He finally managed to get out. It's our Christmas party, can't you see? Sir Topham Hatt beamed.
But Christmas was yesterday,
Thomas stammered out. ever since the snowstorm caused so much confusion and delay, I was about to cancel this year's party until Percy came up with a very interesting proposal.
I was so upset that you weren't able to make it in time that I convinced Sir Topham Hatt to postpone the party until you got back.
Then Rosie rolled up.
Not only to say thank you for clearing the line,
she chimed,
but to show just how much we appreciate you. Every year you always make sure we can attend the Christmas party, so we wanted to return the favour. It's the least we could do, especially after what you and Percy did for me last year.
Thomas was so overcome with emotions that tears began welling up in his eyes.
You held up Christmas for me? I don't know what to say.
But we do, smiled Sir Topham Hatt, who then signalled for everyone to join him in a thunderous, "Merry Christmas, Thomas!" And then the party began. The music and songs rang out loud as everyone made themselves merry with games, jokes, and stories. Then Father Christmas arrived as he began handing out presents to the crowd. And when it came to the entrance, Thomas was the first to receive his gifts: new cans of blue paint and a special supply of Welsh coal. Thomas was so excited that he immediately began blowing his whistle out of joy. Eventually, as the party came to an end, all the guests wished each other a Merry Christmas as they climbed aboard some coaches to be taken home. Thomas then wished everyone a good night before going to sleep himself, feeling happier than he had ever been in a long time. But most of all, he felt very blessed for having such wonderful, caring, and thoughtful friends. And after a night like this, he couldn't ask for anything more. A few days after Christmas, Sir Topham Hatt arrived to see Rosie. "Ah, Rosie, I just wanted to come by and say you did a fantastic job clearing the line with Thomas. I think a reward is in offer."
That's not necessary, sir. Just did what needed doing."
"Nonsense," chuckled Thomas.
"We both know without you I'd still be on this side of the tunnel. Besides, isn't there anything you've been thinking about lately? Anything at all? Merry Christmas indeed." "Well, sir, I would like to get out of this yard a little more. Pull some train sometimes. Maybe see the world."
Pondered Sir Topham Hatt. "I don't see any reason at all why that can't be arranged. You've done great work in this yard, but if you're feeling cooped up, that's all the reason to stretch your wheels a bit. Throw in a new coat of paint, and you'll make a fine example on the main line."
"That's not necessary, sir. I've just had a touch-up before Christmas." "Oh, go for it, Rosie," Thomas chuckled. "A new coat of paint does wonders for an engine's spirit. Maybe even a new colour for a new adventure. Something that says, 'Look up, main line, here's Rosie.'" "Here's Rosie, Well, if you insist, there was one thing."